moving ahead with our third session of the day. The topic is Policy Perspectives, Bridging Governance and Urban Development in India, discussing policy framework that address urban challenges and how they align with the larger vision of India's urban transformation. So, for this, I kindly request Ms. Aditi from ABP to come up on the stage for the fireside chat. And now I request on stage Dr. Debolina Kundu, Director, National Institute of Urban Affairs. Dr. Debolina Kundu is a leading expert in urban governance, housing and sustainable cities. Her work focuses on data-driven solutions and collaboration to create equitable, resilient urban spaces and drive inclusive growth in India. Can we have once again huge round of applause?
Thank you very much, and a very good afternoon to everyone present here. Now, we've been discussing the growth of India's infrastructure, and one aspect that cannot be unaddressed is the urbanization. And when we talk about urbanization in India, it is also imperative for us to talk about the different organizations which have been extensively working, especially in addressing the more key challenges when we talk about India's urban growth. And for that, an organization like the National Institute of Urban Affairs, which is a think tank working extensively, monitoring the urban growth in India and also doing policy research in that sector, plays a very, very crucial role. They have been advising the central government. They have been working with various global organizations also to talk about how India is expanding. And joining us today is the director of NIUA, Dr. Debolina Kundu. Thank you very much for joining us today, ma'am. To begin with, how big and how vast is urbanization in India? Because we always talk about India's urban growth, there's rapid urbanization. So I want to ask you, what are the facts when it comes to India's urbanization? And also, how do you address the issue of bridging the gap between the policy framework, finances, especially when it comes to infrastructure, mobilization, housing, etc.?
Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me to this important session. When we talk about urbanization, in the absence of the 2021 census data, at times it becomes really difficult to explain in entirety. But whatever figures we have from various projections, including the World Urbanization Prospects, we are around 35% urban in the country. So, and when we talk about India is urbanizing at a very fast pace, if we look at the census data, I don't think the census data does support this because it was only in the 80s that India urbanized at a very fast rate. Since the 80s, there has been a decline in the urban growth. But because we have a very huge base, even that small urban growth gets reflected in a huge population increase. So in the last census decade, the data which we have between 2001-11, around 91 million people were added to the urban frame, right? So an equivalent number in the rural areas as well. But as we urbanize, people do not move from urban areas to rural areas. That happened only during the pandemic, which happened for a very short while. So what we find is there is an upward growth towards cities. And if we divide the country into basically three segments, the rural, about 1/3, the urban, which is slightly more than 1/3, and we have the transitional areas, which we call urban, peri-urban, pre-urban. So I think that transitional areas is the most critical when we are addressing urbanization, because the policies here are yet to be formed up. Urban development is a state subject, as we all know, but this peri-urban areas are basically under the rural governance. So it's neither rural nor urban. And the housing development which you find today, or the mess which the World Bank report says that India's urbanization is messy and hidden. So it is hidden in this region. And I think the policy focus needs to come basically here, because the policies really need to be firmed up. And again, when you talk about urbanization, the pyramid, we have a top-heavy urban structure, which means about 70% of the urban population are living in class 1 cities, cities which are more than 100,000 in population, which are around 500. So this 500 cities, they account for more than 70% of the urbanization. Again, financing, when we look at financing, the property tax, the own source revenues, again, about 70 to 80% of the entire country's share of own revenues is again accounted for by these 500 large cities. So there is a mismatch. And at the lower level, we have around 9,500 cities. We have, in the last census decade for which we have the data, 2001-11, the most distinguishing feature is the emergence of census towns. These are the towns which are, again, they satisfy the census norms of 5,000 population, 75% of the population in non-farm agriculture, and a density of at least 400 persons per square kilometer. So these outgrown villages which have urban characteristics have to be really recognized by state governments as statutory towns. Then only can all the central government missions, be it the PMAY Urban or the Smart Cities mission or the Amrut mission, start working here. So this mismatch really needs to be addressed. And we have a very bottom-heavy small towns, right? Top-heavy urban structure and bottom-heavy number of small towns. So I think the policy focus needs to come here.
That's a very interesting point that you've made, because for all these couple of years, at least for the past 5 years, and after COVID and after we came out of the pandemic, we have been talking about rapid urbanization. And you're saying that probably in the past decade, it has actually declined. So ma'am, when we look at the government's vision of 2047, we are standing in 2025, so just about 12 odd years, 20 odd years left. How close are we, or how fast do you think the growth is going to be, given the fact that there is a future vision that has been kept for India?
If you talk about demographic growth, I think we are urbanizing, but I won't say that many people are coming from rural areas to urban areas. That's what we have in our mind, that the trains are overcrowded, too many people coming from the rural habitations to the urban. That's actually not happening. People do come, but on a very short-term basis, because the labor market in cities, they are unable to absorb the rural migrants. So for that to happen, health and education needs to come. Because until and unless your rural manpower is empowered to be absorbed in the urban labor market, that cannot happen. Right? So a person may come as a porter, but then you do not have jobs for porters anymore. You carry your own luggage in the airport, right? Even in the railway stations, very few people do take the help of a porter. So those jobs are almost declining. So if you want the urban impetus to happen, I think the employment sector needs to be revamped. And the rural sector, from where we get the workforce, there we need to provide adequate skilling, education, and health. Until and unless we have these strong pillars, we will not be able to really achieve the vision which our Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister, is envisioning. And we are moving towards Viksit Bharat. I think many strategies have been adopted, but we really need to work on those.
In fact, resources is something that you're talking about, ma'am. That takes me to my next question, which is specifically talking about the smart cities. In fact, with the technological advancement, probably every sector is being connected with how the new age tech, how AI can be actually used in different sectors, infrastructure also being one of them. So while we talk about tech advancement and smart cities in the same breath, ma'am, how do you as a director of NIUA address the current policy framework, or how massively or how on an average it needs to be amended or reworked upon to address these issues?
I don't think that we need to amend. I think an offshoot of the Smart Cities mission, which is going to end very soon in March 2025, is the National Urban Digital Mission, which is again housed at NIUA. And through this, we are trying to reach to more than 4,900 statutory towns across the country, irrespective of the size class, and take citizen-centric governance to the last mile in terms of area, space, and also in terms of the person. So through the National Urban Digital Mission, there are currently 16 services which are being provided, and we often hear our Honorable Prime Minister talking about citizen-centric governance to happen. So I think when we talk about this, we really need to look at the ward level governance. And through National Urban Digital Mission, I think we can take governance not only to the ward level, but also to the sub-ward level, right? And there are states which have really started working in this direction, but I won't say that all states are at the same level of maturity. We need all states to come up on this platform, and I think the future is quite bright on this. And we also have the Cities 2.0 program, where 18 cities, again, it's an offshoot of the Smart Cities mission. We are working on circularity.
Yes.
Right? So 18 cities would be getting dedicated funding to improve on circularity, and also we are, through this mission, we are trying to look at building on a database or a climate observatory in various states at the state level. We already have the climate assessment, smart cities assessment framework. So again, for that, around 250 large cities, including the 100 smart cities, have data at a central repository. So if we have data from various cities on which we can build, I think that would be excellent. Because until and unless you have evidence, how do you build on policy? So that evidence-based policy can happen through these various submissions, and we need to work on GIS platforms. So when you look at master plans, I think the NITI report a few years ago did indicate that we do not have master plans in all our statutory towns, and which is a fact. But through the Amrut mission, I think the initial Amrut 1.0 looked at big cities, but now we are covering all the 4,900 plus towns across the country. So if through the Amrut mission we are able to prepare GIS-based master plans, and again, link that with AI, right? And we have the PM Gati Shakti data. So you have the layer-wise data and the property tax. Through NUDM, we can also have access to the data at the ward level or sub-ward level with regard to property tax. Then you know exactly which are the wards within a city which need dedicated action, policy intervention. And things can happen in a very data-driven way. I think that's possible through AI and GIS. And that could happen because of the smart city. We have the ICCCs, you know, right, integrated command and control centers in various smart cities. So why not we use these ICCCs, expand their areas of coverage instead of being just specific to the municipal corporation boundary? Why not increase their coverage to the peri-urban areas and start working in the transitional areas, so that the areas which get expanded because of urbanization do have adequate services, which is the need of the hour, be it housing, be it transportation, be it any service, or solid waste management for that purpose. So I think interconnectivity and linking the database through GIS and smart technologies is the need of the hour.
In fact, ma'am, you also mentioned circularity, and I think currently all nations are trying very, very hard in achieving the goals, the SDG goals that have been set by the United Nations. So, ma'am, if you could highlight any specific policy frameworks or any specific work that is being focused upon to ensure that India's larger vision of urban growth and infrastructure growth is aligned with the UN's goals that that of course the Prime Minister keeps talking about, the central government has been talking about, and there's a lot of challenges for the state governments also to ensure that everyone aligns together, the policy, the central government, the state government, and of course, as you said, that there is a wide gap in the town planning currently. So there will be a lot of push in the coming few months at least for India to achieve the goals.
Yeah, I think you have very correctly mentioned. And I will say that all the centrally sponsored missions, be it the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana or the Amrut or Smart Cities mission or the PMAY, they are all aligned to the SDGs, right? So it's not that the centrally sponsored missions or even at the state level, the missions do align, and every year we have to report on our achievements to the UN. So that is that. Through the Niti Aayog, we are doing that. And very importantly, the central government, our ministry, the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, of late has constituted 5 working groups in order to strengthen the urban governance in the country and link with the SDGs. How well are we performing on those, and what are the data gaps, if any, and how do we need to firm up? So we have the working groups on administrative reforms, on political reforms, or looking at the transitional areas, which I mentioned a little while ago, as well as the parastatals. We talk about the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act about empowering our urban local bodies. But does our urban local bodies really have the wherewithal to perform? If not, what are the areas? If we do away with the parastatals, then what happens? So these are the areas, and also finally the capacity. So even if you pump in money to the urban local bodies, how many urban local bodies, if you just forget about the metropolitan cities, even if you pump money, do the non-metropolitan cities have the wherewithal to absorb the funding and invest in capital infrastructure, in green bonds? No. So we need to really improve upon the capacity of the urban local bodies, and at various levels of settlements, because we have, as I mentioned, more than 5,000 statutory towns, which are basically small. So their resource raising capacity is again very limited. So there we need to work.
So which means, ma'am, that we can come up with policy, we can come up with regulations, but the key challenge, I think, probably not only in the infrastructure sector, but across sectors, specifically in India, is that of implementation. So do you think that could be a massive hurdle as we are growing in the infrastructure sector?
Yes, because our cities are not geared towards investing in infrastructure, right? So until and unless we have the capacities built in our cities, I don't think we can move ahead. So it is important to have the state level agencies, like we have the KUIDFC in Karnataka or the TUFIDCO in Tamil Nadu. I think these state level intermediaries do play a very great role in really bringing private capital, and also in redirecting the public capital in a manner that there is equitable distribution of services, and also for that investment. I think that's very important. And also the 15th Finance Commission talked about 450 million rupees in terms of shared services, investing in shared services. So through NUDM, we are trying to again work on in these lines. And also the state of Odisha, they have started involving the self-help groups called Jal Sathis in really promoting shared services. So I think by and by we really need to scale up on these interventions if we want to achieve Viksit Bharat by 2047, where we will be at least 50% urban, even by conservative estimates. There is no going back from urbanization. Cities will expand and are expanding, whatever you say. So if we are really going towards urban, then we need to strengthen our urban governance, and for that, I think urban finance and urban capacities and GIS-based master planning is very important.
Ma'am, before we wrap up, since we're also running out of time, I want to correlate the work that NIUA is doing in the different programs that is launched to what the Honorable Minister from Jal Shakti was mentioning, that while we talk about infrastructure, you can't really keep aside the crucial role that water bodies in India really play. So if you would want to highlight the key missions that NIUA is working upon.
So we are helping with the Amrut mission on shallow aquifer management. We did for 10 pilot cities. Now we are working on in another 70 cities across the country. Again, with the mission, Jal Shakti mission, we are working on preparing urban river management plans in 60 cities across the country. 35 just now, and maybe 25 will be added next year. In addition, we are also, I think it's very important to have the concept of sponge cities. So when we are working on urban river management plans, it's not only the riverine cities, but also all water bodies within the city. And through the concept of sponge city, how do you try to improve upon the water tables, right? So those initiatives are already being undertaken, and until and unless we look at the biodiversity part of the city, the climate sensitive master planning, I think things will not happen. So that any infrastructure investment, any intervention has to happen through the climate lens.
And of course, and that's why the discussion that we just had on SDG goals is going to be very, very imperative. But thank you so much, Dr. Debolina Kundu, and congratulations to NIUA for the fantastic work that you have been doing. Just to highlight again, NIUA has been doing an extensive work in climate. They have missions, as ma'am was talking about water conservation, climate, and hoping to push India and support India and the central government in their mission and their vision of being a country which has fast and rapid urbanization. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thanks a lot. I request our guest please stay on stage for a bit, and I kindly request Mr. Umin Thomas, National Head Advertisement Sales ABP, please join us on stage and felicitate the guest. Can we have huge round of applause, everyone?